It's 6600 XT launch day. Yesterday was the, hey, you can get it tomorrow. Today is the day, hey, you can run out and buy this. This is the Sapphire Pulse 6600 XT. Has 3 DisplayPort out, 1 HDMI out. They recommend a 500 watt power supply for this particular variant of the 6600 XT. Some of them will overclock out of the box, some of them will not. It's a lot like the other 6600 XTs that I've already reviewed, but this one's from Sapphire, so that you know you get the Sapphire build quality, the Sapphire thought and engineering, and the custom-looking PCB design. It's got a single 8-pin power connector. It's got the heat pipe heft. My overclocking experiments on this particular card did not go super well, so couldn't really push it beyond its maximum capabilities. Now, in the AMD marketing material, they really refer to this as a 1080p card. A 1080p card? We had 1080p cards 17 years ago with like the RX 480 or the RX 580 or Vega 64. Okay, this is a 1080p card that can do reasonably good ray tracing at 1080p, and it's kind of a monster card for 1080p without ray tracing, like 90 to 120 FPS, even for 4K. Well, 60-ish FPS for 4K in esports titles like Fortnite. Okay, that's actually like 57 FPS out of the box, 4K Fortnite at high. You turn that down to medium and get some better performance, but I digress. The other thing, other than ray tracing, that's the big obvious one, but being a newer card, it has a lot of new features. Variable rate shading, Fidelity FX Super Resolution, although that one also works on older cards. Sapphire has some specific tricks up their sleeve that nobody else does. One of those is Tricks Boost. So Fidelity FX Super Resolution and Tricks Boost, they're very similar. They rely on sort of similar tricks, but Tricks Boost works with everything right now, whereas Fidelity FX Super Resolution only works with certain games that have approved it because you have to insert it at a certain point in the rendering pipeline, so that's something to keep in mind. The other benchmarks put this card within 200 points of the out-of-the-box experience of the other 6600 XTs that I've tested, so it's pretty par for the course. Like I say, the overclocking was the only weak spot, and that may just be the luck of the draw on this particular card. Of course, also this is the Sapphire Pulse, which is meant to be, one of the lower-cost Sapphire variants, so there you go. AMD's suggested end-user pricing on the 6600 XTs is $379. The global situation being what it is, tariffs, manufacturing costs. I don't think it's really possible to produce cards for that, given how hard it is of the logistics to get parts in the first place and then get the parts to the factory and then have the factory get the stuff to the end user. It's not a great situation right now. It's not AMD's fault, it's not Sapphire's fault, it's not really anybody's fault in particular. It's not even really the miners, because a used 2060 on eBay is going for $500. As I can't even believe that. That just seems completely insane. So, if AMD is able to supply all of their partners like Sapphire with enough 6600 XTs, we should depress the crap out of that market. Because if you check this card against an RTX 2060, it's not even a fair fight. It is a 16 gigabit IC, so it's a really pretty smart manufacturing choice from AMD on those 16 gigabit ICs, because they're not really under a lot of pressure from other companies that want that density of IC. So theoretically, there's more supply. So don't feel like you have to impulse buy. Definitely don't feel like it's the deal of the century. If you see one of these on sale for around $379, $400, $450, and you've been waiting for a graphics card, that's probably as good of a deal as you're going to see for a while. The card has the goods. It stacks up. Weak parts are not anything to do with this particular card. The weakest part is the hardware encoder, as I said in my other reviews. The hardware is there for good H.264 and H.265 as an experience, but most people want to use OBS or something like that, and out of the box, it's a little rough. AMD software out of the box actually is pretty good if you use it, but nobody ever uses it for whatever reason. They just want to use it with OBS. So I feel like we got to work on whatever bureaucratic I's we got to dot and T's we got to cross to make the out-of-the-box open broadcaster experience amazing, or Streamlabs or something. Let's get that in an open source repository. I mean, heck, I'll manage it if I have to. I can be the awful team leader that, Scrum Master that forces everybody to do awful things from a programming standpoint. I don't really want that job, but I'll do it if nobody else will. Don't make me. I totally will. Other synthetic benchmarks like Fire Strike, Time Spy Extreme, all the other variants, they basically stack up where you'd expect for the 6600 XT. The card doesn't really have any deficiencies. I would have liked it if it had a BIOS selector switch. That's a nice feature. This card doesn't have it. The Pulse doesn't have it. I'm sure that some of the higher end Sapphire cards do actually have that. It's a pretty basic card. I think Sapphire might advertise this as a 2-slot card, but it's like a 2.05 slot card. If you're using this next to a really big card, like if you're, depending on how your motherboard layout is, and it's like, oh, it's 2-slot, I can put something right below it. If it's a really big card, probably not. If it's another GPU, especially a GPU with a backplate, probably not. This does have a backplate, which is pretty nice. It's open here, so it'll get a little bit of cooling. Not much thermal connection, a little bit, not much, between the PCB and the actual backplate, but at least you're going to get some airflow over the hotspot right here on the back. So DisplayPort, HDMI, and DisplayPort. That's DisplayPort 1.4 with HDMI 2.1 variable refresh rate. It's a pretty good card overall. This card does have a total length of 240 millimeters, making it suitable for compact ATX systems, which is, pretty awesome. Sapphire advertises a game clock up to 2382 megahertz with a boost clock of 2593, and the memory speed, of course, is 16 gigabits per second. It has that single 8-pin power connector, and it only requires that your system have a 500 watt power supply. So this is right in line with that 160 watt number that AMD was touting in their press event for the 6600 XT. That's pretty good for upgraders. Also, having the single 8-pin connector, depending on how old your system is and what you're doing to upgrade, you may not have more than one 8-pin connector available in your system, especially if your power supply is on the lower end of that wattage scale. In terms of my subjective experience testing the card, this is the quietest 6600 XT that I've tested so far. Even at maximum load, even with probably not enough cooling in the case, it was barely audible. So Sapphire has done a really good job in terms of airflow and fan design. I noticed that the fans have built-in rims around the side. Usually that helps, that kind of a design feature in your fans help increase the static pressure. Subjectively, Sapphire did a good job with this cooler. It's not 17 pounds of copper, and yet it does the job really well, quietly. I was really hoping that I could get it to like 2700 core boost clock, but I wasn't able to achieve that, and I don't think it was a thermal issue. I think it was just bending. I think Sapphire has bent their higher-end 6600 XTs into their higher-end cards. So that's been a quick look at the Sapphire 6600 XT. I'm Wendell, this is Level 1. I'm signing out, and you can find me in the Level 1 forums. They're on sale today. Hopefully you got them. Hopefully the stock situation is as good as they tell me it'll be.